Hey everybody. I want to take a few minutes to talk with you about finding academic sources, how you can find them, some of the resources that you have available to you, and then also what some of the different types of academically appropriate sources are. Um, so it may have been a bit of a time since you've done some research, or um, maybe didn't get a good feeling for it, how to do it to begin with. I'm not sure that I'm always the best at it, but I'll tell you that some of the places that I look, and the sources and the resources that I think are helpful for doing research. Um, so the first and most obvious place for us to start here at ECU is at Join a Library, right? And so I know a lot of you, because this is a summer, most of you probably aren't in Greenville, or have going to be going to campus, so you're probably not going to be there in person. And honestly, a lot of research these days happens online anyway, so most people are just going to do it. And unfortunately, uh, the school has a ton of books, like literally tons and tons and tons of books, and lots of resources, um, old magazines and stuff. But new journals, scholarly academic journals, are mostly online now anyway, so it's almost impossible to find a print edition of a scholarly journal. So the website's going to be where you're going to go. So we'll go to Join a Library, and the easiest, probably the quickest way that, or the way that most people are going to get to it is just to the search bar at the front. They have this, what they call the One Search. There are some other ways to find databases in there, and I can definitely show you. But the One Search is usually is effective enough for everyone. So you're just going to go and do a search through there. The other option, and I'm going to show you a little bit more in a second how to use, or how the search returns end up in through the Join a Library's One Search function in a second. But let's look here also. Another one that sometimes gets overlooked is Google Scholar, which is, or you may not even be aware of it, but Google has one of their search parameters, one of their search functions is for scholarly journals, or work through books, or academic sources. And sometimes you can get returns back through Google Scholar searching function. Their algorithms and parameters are a little bit different than maybe the One Search through Join a Library, and so you might turn something up there. And if you find something that you can't necessarily get the entire, you can't get a link to it, or it's behind protected or paywall, most oftentimes those resources are going to be available through Join a Library, but maybe you just didn't find it through Join a Library. So be open to looking through Google Scholar as well. They do have tons of books online, and sometimes they only have partial part of a book, but you might only need that part of the book to work off of. So just use that. Be willing to use that. I'm heartened that most of my students over the past few years have seemed to have got the memo that we don't use Wikipedia at all. You're not going to cite Wikipedia, but we can use Wikipedia as a resource, as a kind of an intermediary resource. So here's an example of a homepage, in a Wikipedia splash page, where you're going to find the outlay of what they're trying to explain, or what the entry is for that. I think we have rhetoric here, but I'm not going to necessarily think that it's appropriate to use this page. But what I can do is, if I scroll down to the bottom, just as in your academic papers, you're going to have a resources list, a references list, or works cited list, or whatever the bibliography is for your formatting style. Wikipedia has that here as well, and so we can use that as jumping off to find sources that we think might be useful. Some of them are going to be popular, but oftentimes, more often than you might think, a lot of these are going to be academic sources, particularly if you're doing academic kinds of research, or studying academic kinds of things. So be willing to use Wikipedia, but in the way that is academically appropriate, as kind of the intermediary source to try to find that next step. All right, so those are the three main ways that I would look online. I'm sure there are tons of other resources if you have, and this is for academic sources, right? So popular stuff is easy to find through Google, but So these are, my main academic resources for finding stuff. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the sources. So books, journals, magazines, or there's some that are going to be a little bit kind of somewhat popular, but are going to still be academically appropriate. Newspapers are academically appropriate in most cases, as long as it's an edited, respected kind of New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times. Those kind of, the big name newspapers are going to be really good. When you start getting into some of the smaller newspapers or some of the tabloid kind of stuff, you might want to stay away from that for sure. And we're talking about academic sources. Certainly some magazines, and there's tons of stuff online, some internet resources that are going to be worth your while, are going to be appropriate, but you have to kind of make that judgment about yourself. So we're gonna go through Joanna Library's website and go through the one search. We're gonna do a search. It's oftentimes gonna turn up our book entries is going to be one of the ones that we're going to see, right? So we're going to see that here, and it's evident by the entries in the middle of the page. It's going to show that this is a book, and it's either going to be an ebook, something that you can download, or maybe one that you need to go and actually pick up from the library. If you want to get the whole book, that's great. I would advise that. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with reading or doing your research like that, but if you're just going to get the ebook, most of the times you can browse them online and get what the resources that you need. They have search functions in there and kind of get the specific stuff that you need. All right, so the same thing, we can also do journal searches, or it's going to show that there are journals. We're going to know that they are journals by, if you look on the left-hand side of the page, you're going to see that it's going to kind of give us some of those parameters of what we're looking for in a journal article. But if you look in the middle, what you're going to see is, the title is going to be obvious. More often than not, with academic journals, you're going to find multiple authors, but it also is going to see, I think highlighted here, you're going to see that the journal title is going to be obvious to you, that it is some kind of a journal. All right, so we look at newspapers again. We want to look at ones that are respected and edited. There are a lot of online kind of things that feel like newspapers that may not necessarily have the same rigorousness when it comes to editing. So the editing is the thing in newspapers that is important to us, right? That it's not just one person writing something on a blog or on Substack or something like that. What we want is an editor to be able to look at a newspaper article and say, hey, where did you get this information from? Prove to me that you got it. That's why we can trust things like the New York Times or the Washington Post or, LA Times or whichever newspaper it is that we're going to suspect. Seattle Inquirer, I think it's. These are newspapers that have a group of people who are looking at the story, asking questions before the thing is even printed. Is this true? Is this accurate? Where'd you get this information from? Show me, prove it, which is the same thing that happens with academic, scholarly journals that are peer-reviewed. When it comes to magazines, the ones that, to me, the gold standard for academic type magazines would be The Atlantic, but Newsweek and Time is really good, or National Geographic, or Science, Nature, all of those types of big name newspapers that monthly or periodical magazines that kind of are somewhere between news and culture and they're almost kind of scholarly because there's so much research that goes into, much editing that goes into writing these articles or compiling them, and usually are going to be a little bit more thoughtful, I think, a little more considerate, and not the day-to-day what's trending on Instagram kind of news stuff. So when we're doing these looking for academically appropriate magazines, that's kind of what we're going to think about. I also don't want you to forget that there are tons of resources on the internet that are going to be of use. There are plenty of academically appropriate websites, statistical people offering statistics, government websites, organizations that are academically appropriate, organizations. We also want to think about their podcasts are a huge thing now and are a great avenue for finding academically appropriate information. There are tons of interviews and serialized podcasts that go deep into information, that go deep into subjects where information can be accessed that way. There are tons of academics or firsthand people with firsthand information about sources and information that you might need to use for your research that are being interviewed. So, if you have some time, just listen, pull one down, do some research. Do a search, try to find some of these podcasts that might be of value to you. Also, within your career field, I'm sure that everybody and their brother has a podcast now. So these academics or these professional organizations are probably knee deep into podcasting now as well. So that might be another source for you to find information about your career field when we get to that, or just when you're doing any kind of research outside of this class or after you're done with this class. Although I do know that many of you guys are seniors, and unless you're going to grad school, you probably don't care about doing this research anymore. Anyway, social media, there are some instances where social media is going to be relevant, but I would probably in most cases stick away from it. The other thing I want to say is that the way that you cite information from all these sources are going to be available to you. There are ways to format them. It may not be readily available to you through like Little Seagull or the Pocket Keys manuals or whatever these manuals are that you're using for doing your bibliographic formatting, your works cited or references list. But you can find out how to format them. The information is out there. A lot of the different formats have style blogs now, where they'll when new things come up, when the new whatever social media thing is, platform is, how do you format something? How do you format a reference off of that? It's out there. If not, you just ask me and I can help you out. I'll help you figure it out. The other thing I want to make sure you guys are at least considering is make sure you're thinking about the quality of information that you're getting from these academic sources, right? They're not all equal. They're not all academic sources are equal in as much as they are peer-reviewed or well considered. Everybody's got there's going to be different levels of quality that's going to come out of this, and it's kind of hard to say. But you really need to think about what is the most responsible or reasonable. Where is this information coming from? Why is it being put out? What is it going to add to the quality of my research and my writing, or is this just something to fill space? Is this the easiest thing I could find? That's not always the best bet. Sometimes it takes a little work, and so you need to really think, are all of these sources equal? Of course they're not. So, I want you to put some effort into really trying to think about the best quality of information that you can find for the work that you're doing. This isn't really hard, but it does take some work. You're going to have to put a little effort into the research and to reading, and that's why I need you to do your research early, organize your writing, plan it out as well as you can, well in advance, and then do the work of writing afterwards. So the actual writing is only a small part of the writing process. Okay, you guys have any questions about finding academic sources? You know where I am. I'll be glad to help.